Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays here on Landy's Crypto Corner, where we take a look at Bitcoin. And of course, we're going to start on the macro here for the weekly at least. And then we're going to actually go up a time frame to the 2 week. So we're going to take a look at the weekly and see where we closed at. And coming into this Monday session that has also closed, but we'll look at the daily in just a moment. Analysis now that Bitcoin is broken out actually gets a little bit easier, believe it or not. When Bitcoin was in the midst of support and resistance zones, we had a fairly complex chart. Now we're relying more on our trend, our support and resistance. Once we start seeing at least a daily high, we can take a look at the last daily low and some of the areas in the macro to the downside, and we'll get into that throughout the week. But it's more about volatility and momentum as it relates to trend right now, and maybe some of those really low-term time frame support and resistance areas like on a 4-hour. But in this case, we can see that Bitcoin did meet the criteria last week of closing above the upper second, and it even closed above the upper third standard deviation here, kicking off more aggressive expansion to the upside. We're now sitting at a 73 over 42. I'm going to show you that metric in charted format in just a moment. But this does imply continuation to the upside and increased volatility as long as Bitcoin is closing above the upper first standard deviation of the Bollinger Band set here. This is currently at around 76,230, so basically 76,300. I would give it some room. If Bitcoin starts to drop the upper second, where we would prefer to see it close above by the end of this week, which is now at $86,000, then, I wouldn't be too worried about it. But if we start to see $86,000 break down on a daily time frame, be prepared to look for that upper first again as an area of interest that we want to see Bitcoin close above to preserve this more aggressive upside expansion. And that's going to be the key from here on out while Bitcoin is in an expansive posture on the weekly. Is closes above the upper second. We're looking for more volatile expansion to the upside to hit some of our deeper targets. And once we see that the upper second is closed below, or if Bitcoin begins to go sideways and the upper second passes price action, then we look to that upper first. We'll likely see, once it does start closing below the upper second, we'll likely see some mean reversion. Either Bitcoin's going sideways or coming down, and we'll see the rest of the Bollinger Band set head up along with the basis band. So the key area to pay attention to by the end of this week in the macro perspective is going to be $86,000. We would like to see closes above there for the bulls. That would give us the bias that we're going to see continued expansion to the upside. Of course, daily closes above last week's high, which is coming in at $93,500. And we're likely going to see continuation to $95,000 to $96,000 by the upper third. Anywhere above there, I'm looking, $98,000 to $100,000 and above. But if we do start to see below 86, there is some local support areas to pay attention to that I'm going to show you in a minute here, around $84,000 to $85,000. Anywhere below there, we're probably looking like 80 to 82.5. And then if 80 starts to break down, we have to pay attention to this upper first and maybe even a retest on a swing of the high side structure over here between 70 and that 73,835. So that's kind of the lay of the land on the weekly. We have a nice uptrending structure here. Now, we don't have a complete trend. We do have the higher low swing, lower low close to the actual higher high here. And then we have the higher low on both a wick and a close. And then we have our high thus far. So what are we looking for from here on out? Well, if let's say Bitcoin were to put in a high here, even in the shorter term on a swing basis, then we'd be looking for something like this. Now, I'm not saying that Bitcoin's going to pull back from here. And in fact, in some of the lower term timeframes, we'll check up on them, but it was looking more as though Bitcoin wanted to play in and around its highs, especially after regaining around $90,000. But just as an example, we're looking for higher low structure from here. So the last higher low is back here at 58.8 on the weekly. And this was, remember, that quarterly closing all-time high from the prior cycle. Yes, the all-time high was at 69K, but the quarterly closing high on a quarterly and monthly time frame there was at 58.8. So that was a nice test, a little bit of a front run in those lower term time frames. Excuse me. And then broke out above that 66,550 and of course $65,000 close open right here, 65,600. And then busted right on through the highs to get this expansion. So, we are looking for at minimum some higher low swings, even if it's all in the same candle, that's fine. That's where we would get a red candle, then we take the swing here or the swing if it's higher, and then the next candle to the swing low. That is what I want to see. I don't know if Bitcoin's ready to do that just yet, but we will find out as this week progresses. Now, in terms of volatility and support and resistance stuff, the last big area for support and resistance is obviously going to be the big support area here. And this is kind of a zone between 71.3 and to be quite honest, you can take even this high here down at 68 and just kind of this entire topside zone. And that 73,835 as kind of the big pullback area to pay attention to if Bitcoin were to lose the upper second, upper first, and start to head down, and especially on any closes below that upper first, then this is all kind of fair game to retest. And a breakout retest is fine. The last higher low is really what we got to pay attention to, and that's down here. And that is at that 58,863. And I believe this is 62,800. Yes, it is. So this would be kind of the big zones to pay attention to the downside. Should Bitcoin, put in a high even higher than this, but let's say it put in a high here and started to pull back on a more macro time frame, like a weekly, which, to be quite honest, with the setup for BBWP, I would be looking for this to stick in and around the upper bands here, at least for a little bit longer, and before it gets kind of a concerted kind of pullback. So that is something that is an opinion. We do have to wait to see how that might play out on the charts, right? Let's go ahead and just mark this out just so that I can kind of illustrate where the prior supports are and where that last higher low is. Anywhere below the last higher low, then there's kind of problems, because that would be a trend reversal setup to a trend break back to the downside. Not necessarily something I'm looking for, and I'm going to show you why in just a moment here. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. We'll turn this off. I can always reference it later. Didn't really need it, but I did want to just kind of give you a visual, something visual to pay attention to here. Now, when talking about trend and then support and resistance and then volatility, well, we should check on momentum here. We do see that momentum for a regular stochastic indicator is up in the overbought zone. Now, I would, especially on any kind of higher low structure from here on out, even if we do see this turn down, I would look for it to bullish a reset. And in fact, it's at $87,500 right now, which is a number that we will be paying attention to when we get down to the daily here in a little bit. But keep that in mind, 87,500, that would turn this down. I'd still be looking for bullish resets on it in the context of higher low structure and the setup that's occurring with volatility right now, as long as Bitcoin is anywhere above its last higher low. And the other big thing is with RSI, we do need to be aware of kind of where Bitcoin got to in terms of its levels up here. It's going to throw bearish divergence on any kind of RSI reads below the last highs up here, which is pretty hot up here at about an 88.5 or so. But I'd be looking for multiple drives. And in this case, I'd also want to see drives in trend, and that's not really possible right now. So not anything really to be worried about at the moment. Let's go ahead and take a look at that volatility metric. We see that volatility is very, very high, and it's got a good distance from the moving average here. Now, volatility is direction neutral, but what would happen if Bitcoin put in a high right here, or it moves higher and then puts in a high? What we'll see is that the volatility metric BBWP would cool down while the moving average continues up. And when they cross over, that's when we look for, potential mean reversion if it hasn't already occurred. We're looking for mean reversion to occur. And then we're looking for either consolidation or a larger retrace. The big thing is we'll also, when this does occur, when this eventually does top out and start to curl back over and then get in and around the moving average being close to it, is we'll see continuation of expansion of the bands. And I'll give you a good example back here. Last year, right around the same time, October into November, we saw an expansion on the weekly, right? And then we got really high levels of volatility, and then we saw it cool down on this sideways price action for a couple of weeks, then the spike up to the ETF high at 49K, and then the spike down to 38.5, which was a big monthly level. Well, we saw the bands continue past, right? So right when it put in, I can't actually get that. I actually tried it. And I know better. Right when we saw Bitcoin cross over here, Bitcoin lost the upper second standard deviation of the expansion here, and we saw it go back into a cool down, held on to the upper first, went sideways, and you'll see that the bands continued past, and then Bitcoin threw a spike up to 49K at the upper second. So this is something to be aware of when we do start seeing Bitcoin close back below the upper second and we start to see volatility cool down. We're not there yet. So Bitcoin is still in full on expansive mode right now, and I wouldn't be looking out for that just yet. I'd want to see closures below the upper second, and I'd want to see the BBWP metric up here get below the moving average before I would call for like a longer form consolidation and mean reversion. And in fact, back here last year, coming into the end of the year, into December, into January, what we saw was it didn't even reach down for full mean reversion to the basis band because it got quite far away after this long form consolidation. Hey, we just went through a long form consolidation, and then it picked right back up and then put in its high there before going into a further consolidation. Of course, that high coming in March just before the halving. So this looks good. I know that metrics are getting maxed out and everybody's like, it's got to pull back at some point. Look, it's blue skies. There's no overhead resistance to reference. It's more Fibonacci level based. And we'll pull a fib real quick here just so we have some frame of reference. Just overhead, we have the 1618 here, and that is at 95. The upper third's right around 96. Anywhere above there, and I'm starting to target around, $98 to $100,000. And that's the 1786 above there, probably 105 to 106 area by the 1888. And then above there, we're looking around 110 to 112 by the 2-spot extension up here, which is just 200% of this range here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this really important thing that just happened, and that is the 2-week chart. And I want to zoom out a bit here because I want you to see the last time that Bitcoin got expansion, because we just closed this past Sunday. We got a close above the upper second and upper third. We have now officially kicked off expansion on the 2-week time frame. The last time that we saw this, guess when? Well, it was in September when things started to turn around, coming into October, and then October into November is when we kicked off expansion. Now, of course, not exact, but we're rhyming in terms of the compression to re-expansion here. And of course, what we saw on the 2-week was a nice trend on the 2-week above the upper second while continuing to tag the upper third here, even losing it as the upper second passed price as it went sideways and from one 2-week closure to the next. And we saw Bitcoin spike up to the upper third, down to the upper first. And guess what? That was the ETF high and the ETF post-ETF low. So ETF high at 49K, which was a big weekly level at around 50 to 53. And then we had the spike down into that monthly at 38,500. And then boom, 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 up. We got nice mean reversion back to the basis band, even passing it, but staying above the lower first, which is really, really nice. And then got the pinch in the bands here. And now we've got our first closure to kick off expansion on the 2-week time frame. Now, this is headed right into higher term time frame resistance in terms of the bands, but it's such a nice setup that it wouldn't take much to get to the 3-week here, which is going to be closing with the next 2-week. And we can see that just above, we have the $100,000 area by the upper third. And to be quite honest, if we start getting up around there and towards the end of the month, I will follow up with this obviously week to week and likely again on Friday. And we'll have to start looking at this as like probably going to see this get closed above. We went and saw the downside expansion for the 3-week here, the nice kind of range that formed, and then Bitcoin's just been marching up even with a spike down to the basis band on the 3-week. But we're just seeing expansion start to kick off again on the 3-week. So what we want is the weekly to have that snowball effect into the 2-week into the 3-week in terms of expansion, and that's what we're starting to see. So that's very good. I guess we'll check on this. Yeah, and you can see that it's just getting rolling. It's not confirmed yet. We need to see closures above the upper second by the end of the month, whereas the upper second, that is at 87,300. So that 87 to 87.5 area locally is pretty important for Bitcoin price coming into the end of the month. We'll keep referencing this as we get closer. The 4-week, we're seeing the same exact thing, except it's not quite ready yet. We're seeing that expansion is not in the cards for BBWP just yet. But in the next closure, we'll see these two come closer together, maybe even cross depending on where Bitcoin closes. We want to see closures above the upper second standard deviation, and that is currently at 86, almost 400. So interesting prices that we're coming up with here for the bands as it relates to the monthly as well, which is going to be very similar at 87,600 is the upper second. Upper third is now getting into the 106 area. And by the way, that local fib pull that we did is going to line up pretty well with that upper third by our 1888 extension up here. So that's going to be right there. So again, above $95,000 to $96,000, which is the current weekly upper third. We're above on the 2-week. We are approaching on the 3-week and 4-week, but we can see that upper third. Once Bitcoin gets above like 95, 96, 100K is the next big benchmark. Above there, we see 106, 105, 106. Above there, we start to see that 111, 110 to 112, basically, is what I'm going to call it. One of the main reasons why I would call it that is because if we were to look at the prior bear fib pull that we've been referencing, which is just the prior cycle high to low, we have some areas of interest above that 112. We're probably looking at some further fib levels in the 115, 120 area. There's other extensions we could pull to get that. But, I'd be counting on the simple ones to be the most effective. But 1414, anywhere above like 115, 120, we got to look to 130 or so, 125, 130 by that 1414. And then, of course, we have the 1618 up there at 173. I will reference kind of the napkin math again later this week on the MicroStrategy accumulation and just the prospect of Cynthia Lummis's bill. Kind of two factors that would put pressure on supply that would give it about a floor of 173. But not really that big of a deal. Sorry about all the noise. But let's go ahead and head down to the daily real quick here and see where things are. Sorry about the coughing. Been talking all day. All right, so upper first, we want to see Bitcoin maintaining above the upper first. Nice little consolidation on the daily here. Let me mute for just a second and cough real quick. Okay, my apologies. Upper first is at 89,500. While I would like to see Bitcoin trading and closing candles above here, if it does start to drop below there, locally we want to see it holding up around 87 to 87.5, right around the closing structure here for this bearish candle. Anywhere below there, eyes on 85,000 to $86,000, I would give it some room in here. So between 87 and 85 here. If we start to see that area lost, well, let's go back and reference this local fib pole again, because there is an extension that is an area of interest. And why is it not? There we go. All right, so below the upper first, we have the 1414 at 87.5, right? So anywhere below there, we start looking at the daily. That's going to be around that 85 to 86 range. Anywhere below there, keep an eye on 82.5 to wherever the basis and this 1.1618 or 68, 1.168, my apologies. The 1.168 is up here at 95, but we have a 1.168 just below the basis band, which is coming in at 80,500. So essentially, if 85 is lost, I would be looking for an area of interest around 82.5 to roughly $80,000. Anywhere below there, the top side of the prior range is fair game. Now, above the $95,000, be aware of the upper second at 98. All right. That is an area, of course, that I just called out on some of the longer term timeframes. If we were to see above $95,000 to $96,000, then I'm looking 98 to around $100,000. So that is key to remember. This looks really beautiful. Just for reference, let's go ahead and get rid of the fib here. The last higher low is all the way down here at 66,800 roughly to 67,800 on a close. You know, I'm looking for higher lows from here on out. More violent pullbacks, you know, that get, down below the kind of consolidation here, you know, especially below 85. You know, I'm looking somewhere around that 80 to 82.5 to start. If that area falls apart, then we can look for retests of the highs, but I'm looking for higher lows. This is a nice trend, and it is a powerful trend. I wouldn't go fading a very powerful trend until I saw lower highs start to form. And that means on a close, by the way. So the consolidation structure that's happening here with a little bit of a swing high to swing low to swing lower high, this is just a consolidation. Don't overthink it. And in this case, we are seeing BBWP cool down. We've seen Bitcoin lose the upper second standard deviation from one close to the next. And we got the continuation of that expansion in the bands, you know, on any really big pump, any closes above 93.5. And I would say even if it starts to trade above 93.5, look to $95,000 above there. Of course, I would look for a retest of the upper second standard deviation, wherever that is, currently at 98,500. So, you know, the closer that gets to 100K, means that we, as long as Bitcoin's hanging around this range, we could potentially see 100K sometime this week or next week. So daily, the daily looks, you know, like it wants to hang out in this overbought zone for a regular stoke. 89,500 is going to be the number to beat there to keep momentum turned to the upside. You know, currently trading a little bit above there right now, 91, almost 300. So looks good. Nothing too crazy. This is kind of easy mode right now. I do, and this is not financial advice, I do think, you know, any kind of violent pullbacks are going to offer up opportunities for the bulls. What you're seeing right in these areas is not people going short with all, you know, selling into this and just going short. This is profit taking and some hedging and some shorter term time frame plays. Keep in mind, tomorrow we have options markets are now going to be open on options contracts, I should say, are going to be open on IBIT. That is the BlackRock spot ETF. So, you know, when I think it's going to be available starting pre-market. So we'll see what begins to happen around there. I would say when market open for the New York session tomorrow is going to be interesting. Now, IBIT is the only the only spot ETF that is going to have options. And I'll be honest with you, I from a strategic point of view, it would not make a ton of sense to start with puts, not when you're in blue skies. That's just me. We'll see what the market desires tomorrow. We'll find out probably pretty quickly. But yeah, that's a lot of players are very interested in that, myself included. So I will be in on some options tomorrow. I want to see what the spreads are like, what they open at, and kind of how much they're going to cost, and then kind of go from there. So very, very interesting times indeed. And yeah, total market cap got spiked. It spiked the highs, the all-time highs, just over 3 trillion. Want to start seeing closures above there. Not going to reference it today. We'll get into that maybe in the check-in on Wednesday, and then kind of follow up on Friday. All right, you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe, and of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.